Okay, this week we're going to talk about the. Am I getting a hum here on the audio? So, okay, that sounds better. Can you hear me? Okay. Brian, you got good sound? Okay. Well, today we're going to talk about tipping points. I have a lot to cover. Each week I get up, I say this almost every week. I think, oh, I've got all this extra time. I'm going to get caught up on all this stuff that I haven't been able to talk about for a while. And then I sit down and start reading through various websites. And this week's going to be a high overview. There's just not enough time to go through everything in detail. There's some very important things that are going on. I will touch on those. Next week, hopefully I'll be doing this from Jerusalem or someplace in Israel. Not sure exactly where yet. So just pray that all that goes together and we get everything comes together correctly. We'll be leaving in 2 days to go there. So just Pam and I. And pray for Pam. She's sitting home with a sinus infection right now, trying to get well before we go to Israel. So we talk each week about the convergence of events, and each week things are converging. This week I'm going to call them tipping points. Now, part of that I'm borrowing from a brief interview that Melanie Phillips did while she was in Israel. She's been in the United States for the last week and a half or so. I actually think she's going to be, I'm pretty sure she's going to be on Jan Markell's show with an interview that I think has already been taped, and that'll be in about 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, she'll be on Jan's show. 2 or 3 weeks, she'll be on Jan's show as the guest. And I respect Melanie a lot. She's secular. She's Jewish, and she has a different worldview than I have. But there's some things we agree on in great detail. Others we disagree on when you get into the religious sphere. But I respect her writing a lot. I think she's a clear thinker. She wrote a book many years ago called Londonistan, which was about Muslim immigration into England and what that was going to look like down the road. She's very intelligent. She's a very clear writer. And she did a little interview, and she talked about tipping points. Here's what she had to say.
Hope for humanity. I think it's...
Okay, let me start that over again. So here we go.
An Earth citizen asked, is there any hope for humanity?
I think it's actually, I think there's plenty of hope for humanity at the moment. We're at a tipping point. Either we will, we humanity, the civilized world,
right.
Either we will having reached this tipping point, we will continue down the suicidal path in which we have been embarked for 2 or 3, 4 decades, or we will actually stop and say, now we have to take control. I think that Brexit in Britain, the election of Donald Trump, and the ferment in Europe all says to me we're at a tipping point. Until Brexit started all this rolling, I would have said, the West, Britain, America, Europe, was on a trajectory of cultural suicide. And if nothing changed, it would be over. Now it's ferment. Now it's uncertain. So there is at least some hope. And what's making it uncertain is this great groundswell from the general populations of Britain, America, and mainland Europe, that we've got to change. We've got to stop this. We've got to stop committing cultural, civilizational suicide. And we have to take control. Now, how we take control is a matter of great dispute. Maybe we'll all not get this right again. But at least there is some hope now that we can stop this terrible suicidal trajectory that we've been on.
Well, and I think she's right. Now, I don't necessarily agree with her that there's much hope in the world system anyway, but there was, with the election of Trump, with Brexit, there were some breaks put in place to a little degree. I don't think to a great degree on certain things. I know for certain that had Hillary Clinton been elected in the United States, a lot of things would have accelerated. The capitulation to Russia, the continued capitulation to Iran, the introduction of all sort of nutty left-wing ideas that would just absolutely destroy culture. I am not of a mind that, and I want this to be very clear, because the argument that a lot of people make was that if you acknowledge that Donald Trump has done anything good, you're looking at Donald Trump as a savior. People who make that argument, you need to stop making that argument. We don't view Donald Trump as a savior. Some people do. I will acknowledge that. I don't. So if I say something that's supportive of Donald Trump, don't dare say that I think Donald Trump is a savior. There's only one person that's coming. It's Jesus Christ, who's coming to set up his kingdom. He's the savior. Okay? And I don't think Donald Trump is. I don't think any human being alive is, even if they align with everything that I wanted. Now, there will be people come that will appear to be that way, and since we live at a time, as Melanie Phillips said, at a time of tipping points, I think we need to be very careful hitching our wagon to just about anybody in the world right now. But, you know, we still live in a world. We don't know exactly when Christ will return. And we were told to occupy until he comes, right? So that doesn't mean we just give up and go live on a mountain someplace or in a cave. We're supposed to still be salt and light in the world. But there are many things, many, many, many things that I see each week that indicates we are at a tipping point where it's going to go the wrong way very quickly. I look at our universities. Now, I'm going to play a clip. I talked about it last week of a debate between, one was a professor at Purdue. I'm not sure about the guy who took the pro-life position. And so the one professor, you're going to see some clips of him. A little hard to hear. You'll have to listen closely. Not the best audio in the world. I try to enhance it a little bit. But they're having a debate about pro-life issues. And his first debate is, the first point this Purdue professor made, and listen, this guy's a professor at Purdue. Purdue's a good university, okay? You know, when I was in law school, my IU professor told me if I ever needed somebody to help, you know, with milk production of cows or, how to clean up after cows and that type, go hire an expert from Purdue because they know that stuff at Purdue. And so it's sort of a little back and forth. I have a nephew who's is going to Purdue right now. So, but listen to just the idiocy of this Purdue professor.
Somewhere between 1/3 and 2/5 of all conception acts do not lead to a viable fetus. Okay, or a birth. Somewhere between 1/3 and 2/5. That makes God the greatest abortionist. And
okay, do you hear what he said? Somewhere between 1/3 and 2/5 of all conception acts, where there's actually an egg fertilized by sperm, result in they don't implant, they naturally abort, which makes God the biggest abortionist of all, is what he said. This is the moronic thinking that, I would say if I came in here and just told you what somebody said, you would accuse me of fake news, making it up. That's why I play these clips so you can hear. So now he's going to go on and he's going to argue about pictures of aborted babies.
He thinks fetuses are children. And he belongs to an organization that likes to show images of fetuses. Okay, that's something that's a trademark. Okay? What would you call the public display of a naked body of a child? I would call that child pornography. Do they have the permission? Do they have the permission of the fetus? Obviously not. Do they have the permission of the parents to show these images of children, naked children, dead naked children? They're not only appealing to the child murder, the child pedophile, those appealing to the necrophile.
So it's a child.
You admit it's a child.
It's a child.
I didn't admit it. I was using his language. He thinks it's a child. I do not. Oh, and if you want to use your if you want to enforce and protect First Amendment rights to allow you to show child pornography, have at it.
Okay, so you heard what he said. Showing naked pictures of a child. He's, aborted fetuses, and you're showing naked pictures of a child. And I'm glad there's some smart kids. The people go to Purdue are really smart, okay? They're just smarter in different areas. But in this one, they really got it right. He said naked pictures of a child, and they say, oh, so you admit it's a child. Well, I didn't admit that. Well, 4 steps down, you did. This is what God calls a reprobate mind. They lose the ability to reason. They can't even listen to their own arguments that they make. And this is what's going on all across our culture. Here's some examples. University of Arizona is now have put out an ad on their website for social justice advocates to police fellow students for bias incidents. Now, if you go today, now this was reported in the press, was picked up by a lot of people. If you go to the University of Arizona website for this student position, it will say, this position is currently closed. We are in the process of reviewing the title and responsibilities. But here is what the University of Arizona administration thought was important enough to put on as a job on their website, because, praise the Lord, there are things called screen capture abilities and web archives that you can pick these things up. And there was this position. There's a picture of what was on the University of Arizona website the other day, social justice advocates. Social justice advocates recruitment information. Okay? And even then they said applications now closed, below information for reference only. Look at what they wanted. The social justice advocate's position is one that, now listen to this, you have to go to college to write like this. One that is grounded in the multicultural competency framework and allows students to gain the awareness, knowledge, and skills necessary to work effectively with students and residents across cultures and identities. The position calls for an understanding of social identity groups, experiences, histories, and practices as it relates to everyday life and life at the University of Arizona. Now listen, right off the bat, all of what they're looking for is a big fat lie. They don't want people who are aware of experiences, histories, and practices, unless, it fits their leftist narrative. That's the only thing they're looking for. Do they ever diagram these sentences anyway? Listen to this one. The position also aims to increase understanding of one's own self through critical reflection of power and privilege, identity, and intersectionality, systems of socialization, cultural competency, and allyship. I don't even know if some of these things are words, and I'm just copying them, okay? So don't send me emails about you're making stuff up. This is what was there. As they pertain to the acknowledgement, understanding, and acceptance of differences. Finally, this position intends to increase a student staff member's ability to openly lead conversations, discuss differences, and confront diversely and sensitive behavior. So what's the goal of this? If you don't agree with the university's policies, rules, and how they interpret everything, we're going to dialogue it out of you. The dialectic that we talk about, synthesis, antithesis, and you come up with something new that agrees with the company line. That's what they're trying to do. Also going on at universities, this is from Foreign Policy, and we talk about, there's all this stuff about Russia, and everybody's against Trump because he colluded with Russia, and seriously, as an aside on that, do you think if there was evidence of that so stuff leaked to the press, if I put it would be in a pile like this, right? Stuff leaked from all over the thing, okay? But what's the pile of actual proof of collusion with Russia? There isn't a pile. You think if it existed, they wouldn't put that out there? Of course they would. So that's not to say that there weren't people in Trump's administration that were doing business with Russia. There's a lot of people that have done business with Russia over the years. And I think he did sell a property to a Russian billionaire for like $95 million. I don't know how much profit he made on it. I think my personal view is it's kind of irrelevant, but bring your proof out. Go ahead and do the investigation. But here is another example. China is investing heavily in American universities. They're setting up things. Okay, so there's a couple big countries that are doing this. The Saudis have been setting up Islamic studies programs in universities all over the country. Probably the biggest one and most influential one is the one at Georgetown University. And remember, when Obama went to Georgetown University, which is a Jesuit Catholic university, there was a symbol for Jesus that they covered over with black paper. Do you think that the Saudi influence and money had anything to do with that? Of course it did. I mean, only an idiot would think that it didn't. And there are plenty of people out there that don't. But in addition to the Saudis doing that, now the Chinese are setting up these Confucius institutes across campuses. And one of the things that they're designed to do is to, of course, promote China's agenda in the United States. Look, we're the largest economy in the world. For now. We're bigger than China and Japan, which are the next two largest combined. It would take China many years of pretty spectacular growth to get up to equal us. That's just a fact. We are the largest in the world. China wants to influence the way we go, so they're setting up these institutes which are designed in large part to restrict what people say about China, just like the Saudi Islamic studies restrict what people say about Islam, and they're trying to restrict thought. It's really a way to enact censorship on campus. Now, where is the best place to put in place censorship in America today? College and university campuses, without a doubt. They're the most fascist, narrow-minded, restrictive places on the planet, at least in terms of the United States. And they push these, so these things are pushed through different programs. So you have the university programs, they're pushed through cultural programs. Every other year, I have to undergo a diversity training session for 2 hours. So it's been 2 years, so I know this is coming up. I have no idea what it's going to be like this year. 2 years ago, well, the last time I took it, same-sex marriage had not been approved by the Supreme Court, let alone all the transgender stuff. So now part of that is to silence you, to say that you really can't have, if you have a diverse view, you're discriminatory. And I don't discriminate against, I really don't. I mean, I may say that I think you're wrong, I think your lifestyle is sinful, you need Jesus and that type of thing, but I don't refuse to do business with anybody, at least consciously that I do. Now, there's certain cases that I would not take, which I'm allowed to do, have been allowed to not take as a lawyer, and I suspect when certain ethical rules that were enacted last year by the ABA make their way through the states, lawyers may not be able to refuse to take certain cases, and they're going to target lawyers to get them out of the profession. So, look, I'm old enough, I've only got a little bit of time left, but this is the way that it's going. Here's another tipping point. France. Now, Macron won last Sunday. He won the election with 60-some% of the vote. I've heard some people say it was 66.06%. I don't know if that's true. I do know this. 30% of the people that voted in the election spoiled their ballots. mismarked them, tore them, whatever, so they couldn't be read. It's what people did unintentionally in Florida back in 2000, remember? In France, they did it on purpose because they were so distraught over the choices that they had. And I don't think Macron even really had a party. I mean, as they're forming their parliament now, he's got to get affiliated with a party. I don't think he was affiliated with a party before. He's not even been a school board member or anything. He's had an affair with the school teacher, but he's not been on the school board, okay? And he married his school teacher. But the other thing, tipping point, they had this giant celebration for him in Paris last Sunday when he won. He came and gave a victory speech. Now, I do try to avoid conspiracy theories here because I think that you very quickly get down a pretty dark hole, and it's sort of like a black hole in some respects, and light doesn't really come out of a black hole, and we're supposed to be salt and light. So I think it's a very dangerous way to go to get too wrapped up in them. But listen, I will acknowledge this. I know that there are people that want to take over the world, and they're operating in many different venues. They're operating in financial, they're operating in technology, they're operating in government. And they have been for a long time, because we know that there is a one world government and one world leader coming. The people that have been doing this, my view is, they want to do this, and they try, and they try, and they try. They're just not very good at it. Okay? I know all the arguments about, from 9/11 on and all the wars and that type of thing. But my view is, in terms of my own personal life, there's not much privacy for anybody anymore. I'll acknowledge that. But I'm not controlled. I know there's people trying to control things. And eventually, when God says it's time, all this stuff will be taken away. All the protection, God will pull it back to allow his final eschatology plan, his prophetic plan, to work out. But I do find, and I'm aware of all the theories about Illuminati and Freemasonry and that type of thing, there are some, what I would call, creepy things that happen. And one of these was Macron. He comes out, and they decided to do this at the Louvre right in front of this thing, this pyramid that was built. Now, you'll hear that there are 666 panels in this pyramid. That's not true. There's about 673. But so, don't make too many connections about it. But watch this. Now, he comes out, and, well, I'll talk over. You might want to turn the sound down a little bit. But listen to what he's playing. That's Beethoven's Ode to Joy. That's not the French national anthem. That's the European national anthem. Now watch, he goes up to these steps. Now watch this frame. There's the pyramid. Huge crowd. And watch when he walks to the podium. Now, it's not showing up real well because of the contrast. Let me see if this next video does it. This might show up a little bit better. Okay, you can kind of see the pyramid back there, and it's kind of got that, almost looks like the eye thing at the top. Okay, this is really weird, okay? This may indicate something. Now, I'm not ready to jump on pin the Antichrist tail on every donkey in politics, okay? Because this week, I've heard Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, Emmanuel Macron, Mahmoud Abbas, on and on and on. Ultimately, that person is identified, I believe, when he goes into the temple and declares himself above all that is called God. That's when people will know that this is the guy. There are people who say it will be when a peace treaty is signed, or the confirmation of the covenant in Daniel 9:27. But we don't know that that's a public identifiable act. We do know when he goes into the temple, and we do know from that point forward, his reign is identified in a number of passages as 1,260 days, 3.5 years. We know that period, Jerusalem will be trampled down by the Gentiles during that period of time. So until then, will we be able to identify him? I think people that are familiar with the prophetic scriptures might have a pretty good clue, but I don't think the text in 2 Thessalonians 2 really says that the identification is he goes into the temple and declares himself above all that is called God. Government leaders in the world do a lot of things in secret, right? So not necessarily are they going to come out in the public with this covenant. And everybody says it's a peace treaty. Maybe a peace treaty, may not be a peace treaty. The text says confirms a covenant. So, but I think this is strange. Okay, I'll admit to you, him doing this in front of that pyramid with that little blinking thing at the top. I don't know that this has ever been done before. So let's just say at a minimum, that's creepy and that's interesting. In Europe, in Great Britain, they're getting ready for an election. It looks like Theresa May's party should win handily, but the left, headed by Jeremy Corbyn, who's have a lot of trouble with their anti-Semitic positions and that sort of thing, they're going back to the 60s and 70s, and they're essentially rolling out what's like a communist manifesto that they want to put in place. It's a strange time. I mean, I thought we had finished all that, but it keeps coming back, which leads me to believe that this leftism is part of this in-time geopolitical religious system that comes about. This is an interesting email Pamela Geller got. She says, I get these emails all the time from people in England. This one says this. This is from a lady in England. Please keep my anonymity. No means of communication is truly secure. No older white person here, Jew or Christian, is safe in my London borough. We are in effect ruled by Muslims, mainly ignorant and illiterate in this London borough. They control the council, the socialized housing, the healthcare, and the local services. I am 65 and I am single and have no family. I have abiding fears for my future. I am already chronically sick, but what will happen to me if my health takes a turn for the worse? If I have to enter a care home, I risk neglect and abuse. These Muslims hate Christians. Christians pay almost all the local taxes, but we are discriminated against. I am saving up my pills for the day I may need to check out, even though I believe suicide is a sin. Muslims play a numbers game. The objective is to dominate. Will I be able to claim asylum in the USA because of my being oppressed and discriminated against in my own country by Muslim invaders? Now, look, now she might be able to. If Hillary Clinton had won, she would not. This is the tipping point that we're talking about. You don't think this tipping point is important? Look at this from Gatestone Institute, just published this morning. Germany is confiscating homes to use for migrants. A massive attack on the property rights. Listen to this. This is in Hamburg, Germany. Now, Hamburg is not a little burg. It is the second largest city in Germany, behind Berlin. Second largest city in Germany. That would be like, what's the second largest city in the United States? Los Angeles or Chicago, behind New York. This is not inconsequential. Listen to this. In an unprecedented move, Hamburg authorities confiscated 6 residential units in the Hamm district near the city center. A trustee appointed by the city, and then, by the way, the government in place are socialists, leftists. And so why are they taking this? A trustee appointed by the city is now renovating the properties and will rent them against the will of the owner to tenants chosen by the city. District spokeswoman Serena Weiland said that all renovation costs will be billed to the owner of the properties. Similar expropriation measures have been proposed in Berlin, the German capital, but abandoned because they were deemed unconstitutional. Some journalists are asking, what is next? Will authorities now limit the maximum amount of living space per person and force those with large apartments to share them with strangers? You want to know that is a rhetorical question, to which the answer is obviously yes. You read through this, says that Socialists and Greens in Hamburg recently established a hotline where local residents can report vacant properties. Activists also created a website called the Vacancy Detector to identify unoccupied real estate in Hamburg and other German cities. It remains unclear why the landlord in Hamm left his apartments vacant for more than 5 years. Some have posited, given the location of the properties, the renovation costs may have been too high and probably would not have been offset by the rental income. Others are blaming city. So listen, $15 per hour McDonald's workers are leading to what in America? Closed restaurants like crazy. San Francisco, they're shutting down. Seattle, they're shutting down. And, you know, guys like Jerry Brown and Nancy Pelosi and the former Attorney General, who's now a senator from California, Kamala Harris, who I hear is, you know, on track to be a presidential candidate in 2020. You need to learn about this lady. She is a radical leftist. And I use the term radical in the most radical sense of the term radical. In this article, it also said others are blaming city officials for not approving more building permits to allow for construction of new residential units. Why? Because like in Sweden and other places, the law firm I work for used to represent cities and municipalities. And in the city where I live, Dublin, very nice place to live. Everybody wants to live there, despite the rude kids who block the highway getting to the high school at about 7:45 every morning. But they never let anybody in. It's like, I never wanted to get to school that badly. You know, I mean, it's just, anyway, that's just one of my pet peeves. You know, I look at the clock, if it's between 7:45 and 8:10, I just, you know, get another iced tea or something like that and stay at home. But in Dublin, when we had things put up, we would have opposition. So, for example, the mall at Tuttle, which is actually in Columbus, it was supposed to be built in Dublin, but they didn't want it. And there were two groups that opposed it. We called them the NIMBYs and the Nopes. The NIMBYs, N-I-M-B-Y-S, were not in my backyard, and the Nopes were not on planet Earth. And both of those opposed the construction of malls and other businesses, even though the construction of those would help relieve a little bit property taxes that you have to pay to support all the nice things we have there. Well, this is what's happened in Germany and Sweden and other places. They don't want people to build, so they don't issue residential building permits. Now they've let in 1 million, and I hear there are 8 to 10 million more immigrants right now ready to go into Europe. Mostly male, and they will reproduce, and whatever population problem they're having, they say it won't happen until 2050. These things are coming in, it'll happen in 10 years. The Muslim populations will be essentially in control of Europe. Large chunks of the big important countries of Europe. And the European leaders sort of acknowledge that that's going to be the case. But now they don't let people build, then they bring all these people in, so now they're looking for vacant property. Listen, this is what would have happened in the United States if Hillary Clinton got elected. It would have changed. And so, in fact, in Hamburg, what they're doing, I know I sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but in Hamburg, they're actually going out and confiscating vacant commercial buildings and turning them into residential areas. Now, look at what they are calling the retail apocalypse in the United States, with store after store after store closing. Sears is at a tipping point. Nordstrom's, even a good chain like Nordstrom's, has closed its stores. Macy's, JCPenney, H.H. Gregg went out of business. All these big box stores are going out of business, and there's all this vacant commercial real estate around which needs to be repurposed. And there's probably more in the United States than in all the rest of the world combined. Well, if these people were in charge in the United States, what do you think they would be doing? They would be setting up immigration centers in those areas. Mark my words, they would take them over. So that's another thing. And remember, it was Konrad Adenauer. No, that's Kurt Waldheim. Kurt Waldheim, who I believe is the ambassador to the UN, who really was one of the moving forces behind a resolution to the UN that said Zionism is racism. And look how far we've come from that. In the Middle East, Christians are moving out like crazy. You see the decline in population. For example, in 1910, 77.5% of the population of Lebanon was Christian. By 2025, it'll be 30%. Look over here at Turkey. It used to be 21% in 1910 was Christian in Turkey. And I use Christian, they're using it in kind of a broad term. 0.2% by 2025. You could do the same thing with Jews in these countries. And the percentages would probably be even lower. There is a move by a certain religious group to eradicate anything that doesn't agree with them from their countries and from anywhere else where they gain the upper hand. It's the truth. The numbers are unmistakable and undeniable. And I do think this plays a big thing in the prophetic end times. Now, keep the sound down on this next. There's a series of videos here. We talk about another tipping point is all the different anniversaries. So when we're in Jerusalem in about 10 days, May 24th, they'll celebrate the 50th anniversary of the victory in the Six-Day War. They just celebrated the 69th anniversary of the founding of Israel. If you convert that to prophetic years, by the way, 360-day years from the founding of Israel on May 14th, 1948. Friday was actually the 70th anniversary of the founding of Israel in prophetic year terms, 360-day years. It's 100 years since the Armenian genocide. It's 100 years since the Ottoman Empire fell apart. It's 100 years since the Ottomans lost Jerusalem. It's 500 years. I mean, they're on 500 years since the Reformation. On and on and on. And so here, what is this? This is Fatima, Portugal, Friday. The 100th anniversary of this, what I personally consider to be a demonic apparition or demonic vision that 3 shepherd children had at Fatima. And here is this crowd of 500,000 people in a square. If you've ever been to the Vatican in Rome, this square is the size of St. Peter's. And so in the day, they had a mass, and there's a little chapel, and they bring the statue of the Virgin Mary out, and they weave through the crowd with it, and they carry it over to in front of the main building, and they had a ceremony there where the Pope actually canonized the 2 of the shepherd children as saints. And then when he was finished, they did a mass and a ceremony, and speaker after speaker. Folks, I've joked with friends that watching golf on television, I find it to be riveting. Now people, they mock me for that. I actually find it enjoyable, and even though all the interviews sound like all the other interviews, I do find it very interesting. That's just my thing. This ceremony, the daytime one, was 3 hours and 35 minutes long. And I want to tell you, I fast-forwarded through it, and it was boring out of my mind. So this ceremony, they had several visions that happened at Fatima, they claim, these shepherd children. And they had a mass here at night. You see the giant rosary beads. And they talked about Mary. And so here's what the Pope had to say. And by the way, there was also supposedly some thing that happened with the sun going backwards or changing direction in the sky. And I think they tried to tag something that was similar on to the end of the video from the Catholic network. And the Pope bowed and prayed to the statue. Don't tell me that he didn't. I watched it. He bowed and prayed to the statue. And then they took it over to the little chapel where it sits, the Chapel of the Apparitions. There's this giant church here. You see it in the middle. And then there's a little off to, I think, to the left, there's a little Chapel of the Apparitions where the statue resides most of the time. They bring it out every year for the celebration. This happens to be the 100th year. So he canonizes two of the shepherd children that saw this. I'm not sure if the other one has just recently passed away. I think she's died in the recent enough past that she can't be canonized yet because you have to be dead for a couple years or more before you can be canonized. So, but here's the Pope. Here he is praying at the thing. I give thanks to God the Father who at all times and in all places acts within human history, pilgrim of the peace that you announce in this place. I praise Christ our peace, and I pray for harmony. I praise Christ our peace, and I pray for harmony. I think this is why it took 3 hours, because it's just... Folks, do you know what an act of idolatry is? If you have any question in your mind, just watch that. This is the night thing. Then he comes back. This is back at the Chapel of the Apparitions. You can see the big church in the background here to the right. As teacher of the spiritual life, the first to follow Christ. I want you to listen to this. On the narrow way of the cross, by giving us an example. Or a lady unapproachable and impossible to imitate. He says, we make up our own Marys, is what he's talking about. And then he says this. A woman blessed because she believed always, and everywhere in God's words, or a plaster statue from whom we beg favors at low cost. And there were people with these big statues all over the crowd, if you watched. The Virgin Mary of the Gospel, venerated by the church at prayer, or a Mary of our own making. Listen to this. One who restrains the arm, of a vengeful God, one sweeter than Jesus the ruthless, one sweeter than Jesus the ruthless judge, one more merciful than the lamb slain for us. And he said, this is what Catholics do. Now, he didn't tell them, don't do this. This is blasphemy. This is apostasy or anything like this. He just laid out what they actually believe. So, I watched, it took me a good hour and a half to go through this to pull out a few clips. I will be honest with you. I was physically sick to my stomach when I finished. I find this so disturbing. This is the modern age, and yet they fight it. Well, last Sunday, let's look at Israel and Jerusalem Conference last Sunday, Jerusalem Post Conference in New York. Got a few clips for you. I don't have time to play, but trust me, we would be here till 2 o'clock if I played the length of the clips that I have. But to set this up, one of the 100 most influential people by Time Magazine, that they published a week or two ago, is this lady on the right, Linda Sarsour. She is a Muslim. She's an anti-Semite, and there's a big controversy brewing. So in the Forward, which is a left-wing Jewish newspaper, they have a couple of different articles. One is why Linda Sarsour should speak. She's been invited to the City University of New York to be the commencement speaker. May have already spoken. She's anti-Semitic. She's Hamas-affiliated, Muslim Brotherhood affiliated. And she is advanced by Time Magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in our culture. You need to pay attention to this stuff that's going on, folks. why Linda Sarsour should speak and Sebastian Gorka should not. And so there's been these articles, a few noisy but powerful voices on the Jewish writer demanding that City University of New York rescind the invitation because of Sarsour's extreme views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Others predictably defend her interfaith work in this country. The bar for interfaith work is like, you know, I don't even know if you put the bar for interfaith work here on the floor, I would trip over it if I shuffled my feet. That's how low it is. And her right to free expression, because City University of New York is a public university, top elected officials are drawn into the fray. They should be, because, so he says, one can have visions of whatever, a better and more beautiful world as prophesied by the Workman's Circle when reading the delusional praise of Linda Sarsour in the foreword by New York City Council member Brad Lander. So people are praising her on the Jewish left, but they did publish an article, to their credit, saying that it's a moral disaster to have her speak there. And there's a long article that talks about this. As a former trustee of City University of New York, I can state categorically that claims of free speech in these matters are nonsense and amount to deliberate obfuscation by elected Democratic officials who have placed their chits with the radical left to the detriment of Jews. Rare exceptions include Representative Carolyn Maloney, who in summing up Sarsour's shortcomings remarked, surely CUNY can do better. And so there's this long article in the forward. You can find it online. And the nonsense arguments that they make that somehow this is protecting free speech. Well, at the conference, Caroline Glick weighed in. I'm only going to play a minute of this because this is about a 10-minute clip. But here's what she had to say about this controversy when she was in New York last week.
Today we have a situation in the Democratic Party where, to the side of extraordinary friends of the Jewish people like Congresswoman Grace Meng, we have a rising star by the name of Linda Sarsour. Linda Sarsour was extolled by President Obama as a change maker, I think he called her. She was listed as one of the most influential people by Time magazine last year. She was the head of the Women's March that opposed President Trump the day after his inauguration. And not to put too fine a point on it, but she's an anti-Semite.
Caroline doesn't make fine points.
Linda Sarsour has said that there's nothing creepier than Zionism. She said that Zionist women cannot be feminists. She's a major supporter of BDS. She supports Hamas. She's tweeted in favor of Palestinians stoning Israeli cars. And she's going to actually be a commencement speaker at CUNY on June 1st. So when my colleague and friend, Mort Klein from the...
So she talked about it in very good terms. Look up on YouTube, go to JPost TV, all one word, JPost TV. That'll take you to your channel. Click on videos. It'll put them in reverse date or the most recent down. You'll see all the videos from the conference last week. And they have one that's about 11 hours long. So it stops after about 7 hours. They lost the video feed, and they didn't. Caroline's not in that. They put the ones they didn't include. Here's Sebastian Gorka. Now he's being attacked by the Jewish left, by Forward, as a Nazi, and he works for Donald Trump. That's why he's being attacked as a Nazi.
And that's why people who don't want the truth to be told attack us. I think it's fascinating. Who are the leaders of the attacks, the slanders against this administration? Scratch it a little bit deeper, and who do you find? People who are either all connected to the BDS movement or people who are all pro-JCPOA Iran deal. Doesn't that tell you something? So we say, speak truthfully about the threats. And the president said, remember all the fake news about, oh, he's going to climb down and he's not going to talk about it the way he did during the campaign. Look at the video of the joint session of Congress. What was the moment where the president stopped and stressed 3 words the most? It's when he stopped, looked at the camera and said, the enemy is radical Islamic terrorism. We are not stepping down. We are not watering down our message.
And you can find his clip about 3 hours into that 11-long-hour session. I just don't have time to play it today. And then another speaker was Naftali Bennett, and I'll play just a little bit of that.
The way I was here during 9/11. I want to tell you a story. So I was selling anti-fraud software to big banks. I was the CEO and founder of a startup, and I used to pitch these banks in Columbus, Georgia, in Oklahoma, in Montgomery, Alabama, in Omaha, Nebraska, all around America. And I want to tell you a lesson I learned. You know, whenever you run a high-tech company, you always have to overpromise because, you know, you have to show something that you don't have yet. And many times there's disappointment. Now, one time we were running slow on schedule to deliver the software to a big bank in Columbus, Georgia. And, you know, my folks were sort of fudging the client. I called him up, a guy called Andy Marks. And I said, listen, Andy, got to tell you the truth. We're going to deliver the software 2 months late. Andy Marks from the South. So he tells me, you know what? I'm almost quoting him. I'm pissed off at you, but I respect your integrity. And that's the point where I learned that we need to tell the truth. Doing business in America, I learned that tell the truth. Even if it's unpleasant, tell the truth. Don't fudge. And that's what I want to do today. I want to speak truth to power. You know, everyone's talking about the deal, the ultimate deal. And I want to be very clear. We profoundly seek peace. Every Israeli profoundly seeks peace. The left wing does not have a monopoly on peace, just as the right wing doesn't have a monopoly on patriotism. We all want peace. We all love our country. The question is how to get there. And I want to walk you through a few realities and then suggest the path that we ought to go through. So when we're talking about the deal.
Well, he goes on, he talks about, you know, it's really this two-state solution thing, essentially, he says, it's never going to work. But everybody wants to push it and push it and push it. Some other things going on in the Middle East. There's elections going on in Iran pretty soon for the new president. Rouhani is still leading in the polls, but there are 6 candidates, all of them approved by this guy. So don't expect any radical change in the way Iran approaches anything. The U.S. and Turkey are getting into it because we're arming the Kurds, and Erdogan views them as terrorists because they want their own state. And there have been Kurdish elements that have been involved in some terrorist bombings in Istanbul and elsewhere in Turkey. But we're arming them because they're sort of critical in the fight against ISIS and rooting ISIS out of their strongholds in Raqqa and Mosul. And so there's this tension, and Erdogan's coming to the U.S. And look, Turkey it's not an inconsequential country. It's the largest military in the European Union in terms of personnel. It's the 17th largest economy in the world. It's not an inconsequential country. So don't poo-poo Turkey. And I do think Turkey is a player in some of the end-time scenarios. Some think Erdogan's the Antichrist. Other people are very angry about this. And so everybody argues and splits and divides over somebody who we don't know exactly who it will be until he goes into the temple. Okay, so I don't think it's something, make your case. Let's not divide over it. There are a lot of good arguments out there where this Antichrist is going to arise from. I don't think it's Jared Kushner, by the way, but, you know, everybody's just all Twitter literally about this. Erdogan comes out this week and lashes racist Israel, calls for Muslims to flood the Temple Mount. Now, I'm a little uncomfortable about that because I'm going to be staying half a mile from the Temple Mount for 10 days. starting Tuesday. But at the same time, the Temple Institute guy is coming out and saying Jews should flood the Temple Mount with visits. And Donald Trump is coming to the Wailing Wall on next Monday. Literally a 15-minute walk through the old city from where we're staying. And so I'm thinking, like, are they all going to try this at the same time? And should I go to Haifa that day or something? So I'm not sure what to do. And I will try to do, like I said, do my prophecy update from Jerusalem next Sunday. And I may get out of town. I don't know. Could be very interesting. And so Erdogan is sort of showing his true colors. You know, he's a dictator now. Now, you know, Trump and Abbas, they stood there and they had this thing. Then a week ago at the White House, and then this headline hit the Jerusalem Post early this week that Abbas has decided to sign a peace deal with Israel. And now everybody's running around, oh, this is the covenant, you know, and this is the beginning of the 70th week, and I don't think it is. We'll have to see how it plays out. Okay, you know, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I don't think so, but I think it does play into some of the end time scenarios, especially when you closely read Ezekiel 35 and 36, and I'll let you do that on your own, about a people in the mountains of Israel that are very haughty and proud and think they have a right to possess that area. It sounds very much like the world that we live in, the world there in Israel. There's also, this is Ron Lauder, he's close to the president, and supposedly he said something, and Netanyahu is very upset because Trump's going to do the deal, and it gets very, very confusing. Melanie Phillips has a good article. Well, we do know this. The president is going to go to Saudi Arabia, Jerusalem, Riyadh, then Jerusalem, then Rome. It's sort of called the monotheism tour. Here's what he said on May 4th. Can I go about 10 more minutes? Like, you say no, and I'm not going to. If you have to leave, get out. So, here's
is the cornerstone of peace. And that is why I am proud to make a major and historic announcement this morning and to share with you that my first foreign trip as President of the United States will be to Saudi Arabia, then Israel, and then to a place that my cardinals love very much, Rome.
And Paula White, who's standing there behind him, by the way, she likes it too. Remember, she was there with Benny Hinn when she. Oh, never mind. You know this. You could look up the story.
These visits will take place ahead of the NATO G7 meetings and will begin with a truly historic gathering in Saudi Arabia with leaders from all across the Muslim world. Saudi Arabia is the custodian of the two holiest sites in Islam, and it is there that we will begin to construct a new foundation of cooperation and support with our Muslim allies.
By the way, he won't be going to Mecca and Medina, because if he did, they would kill him. They don't care who he is. So listen to his comments just a minute here. Well, I lost the video, so he's going to these different places. Melanie Phillips has a really good article at melaniephillips.com. Go read it in detail. It's called Change the Narrative, Mr. President. It came out, it's dated May 12th, melaniephillips.com. And she concludes with this, that, you know, there's all this, you know, so Trump's going, and Ron Lauder said something, and Netanyahu's furious, and then it's like Trump's going to announce the embassy change when he's in Jerusalem. He's not going to announce the embassy change in Jerusalem. He's going to announce the embassy change. He's just not going to say anything about it. He's just going to let the extension expire on June 1st, and then the embassy will have to move anyway. You know, I think in the Jerusalem Post one day, there were 3 different scenarios that they said were going to happen. This is a little bit confusing. And so what I would say is just wait and see what happens in a week. I don't think he's going to move the embassy. That's my personal opinion. And Melanie, she admits, this is very confusing for people. Everybody's running around. He has to do this. I hate him if he doesn't. I hate him if he does. He's a liar. He's, you know, look, the president could do himself a big favor if he shut down his Twitter feed, I think. And he would help out the people on his staff because they're running around like crazy. And a lot of them are going to quit in the near future, I think, because they don't like it. So, as I've always said, I've always had low expectations for the president. And I'm going to be there when he's making this big thing to Jerusalem. He's going to the Wailing Wall. Supposedly they're shutting down, Joan, I think you told me they're shutting down Masada on Tuesday morning till 12:30 because he's going to go down there and make a speech. And I think he'll probably helicopter from there back to his plane and leave. He might have a boss in some of his meetings. But we don't know exactly what's going to happen. There's nothing in the prophetic scriptures. We do know this. We do know that the problem of Jerusalem will be a burdensome stone for the world until the Lord returns and settles up the accounts. It's going to be difficult. I think the last paragraph of Melanie's thing is this. Talks about, and in negotiating with an unconscionable agenda encourages its proponents to twist the scroll still further. It's talking about the Palestinians. Donald Trump wants to go down in history as the president who solved the Arab-Israel deal impasse. What the author of The Art of the Deal needs to realize, however, is that the solution lies in grasping that a deal here is impossible and that what is needed instead is to defeat the vile aim of destroying Israel. Change the narrative altogether, Mr. President, and your place in history will all but be guaranteed as the person who faced down an agenda of falsehood, hatred, and extermination to pave the way for a more decent, stable world, safer world. Now, she's an optimist. You know, she doesn't understand Bible prophecy like we do. But listen, somebody's going to do this. You understand? And they're going to do it in a way, and it's going to start off what we believe is a future 70th week. It is a very important time. We are at tipping points. Oh boy, I have some really good videos you're going to have to do. Okay, so one last thing. The last week in August, we're going to do a prophecy conference here. Mike Clapham, myself, Steve Mitchell, and Patrick Wood. Patrick Wood is big on technocracy and how technocrats, of which Emmanuel Marcon is one of the most prime examples of in the world today. He's a leftist. He's not a centrist. He's a leftist. He's been trained in the Rothschild investment empire. He's made a lot of money. He's considered a genius. I think he's a creepy guy, okay, in terms of Bible prophecy. Creepy guy means he's a guy you better pay attention to. But I've done some seminars on this, on the Internet of Things, how everything is connected. And Patrick will talk about this, smart meters and that type of thing. So I ran across this video from a Internet of Things conference the other day, and it's called The Internet of Things, The Internet of Everything, The Internet of Every Danger. Just listen to a short clip of this.
I'm just here to share information. I'm a practitioner. I'm a security officer. I have been in this business for about 30 years. So what I'm here going to do is really share information with you. Theft of data can happen at two levels. The typical level is some people could steal your private data, use them or sell them. In some countries, this is a big worry. In some other countries, people don't care. You go to China, and I tell people I'm going to steal your data, so what? They don't care. So it's not a threat that is...
Why don't they care in China? Because they're surveilled already anyway. I mean, they get social scores now in China for how they interact with other people and support the government. That like goes into their credit business score. They're graded. And if you have friends that are kind of dissing the government, you're going to get downgraded because of them. So it creates this peer pressure thing. So he's talking about theft.
Meaningful everywhere in the world. It has a component of culture associated with it. However, extortion is much more juicy, if you will. I can make significantly more money on extortion. Extortion is, I'm going to steal private data for a given type of device. For example, I'm going to start recording all these images generated by this intelligent camera. I record everything, I store everything, and then I contact the company that makes these cameras, and I say, you're going to run out of business because I'm going to publish all these images that I have been able to capture. And then reputation will be so bad you will die. Unless you pay me 10,000 bitcoins, of course. So we see a lot of this extortion. Extortion is one of these very shrewd, clever ways the organized crime communities are using to monetize. They don't attack you, they threaten to attack you. And very often, even as the CEO of an organization, you don't know if you are vulnerable or not. And sometimes they will give you some evidence that they succeeded in attacking you. Can you make the risk? Can you really call the bluff, or should you pay? It's beautiful. As an attack, it's really, really clever. Cyber warfare.
So this was just like put up a week ago. And he's talking about, I work for a security firm, and I can't tell you that you're secure or that we're secure. We do the best we can, but we're not sure we've got all the holes covered. And because it's a wide open internet, there are things that do it. So you can find this internet of every problem, or whatever that title was. What was the title of that? Internet of every danger. Just type that into the YouTube search bar, and you'll find this French guy talking about cybersecurity. Now, those talks are always interesting, and I gave a talk a year ago here in Dublin about the Internet of everything and some problems and issues with it. And everybody, okay, it's great. Can we go watch the Muirfield tournament now? Because we held it at Muirfield Country Club. Because people will come to Muirfield Country Club when the tournament's on, even though golf is boring to some people. They will come there for the social thing and the free lunch. But the point is, we talk about these things all the time, and they're hypotheticals, right? It's not really going to happen. I mean, there's not going to be cyber chaos. There's not going to be hackers. There's not going to be 100 countries attack and a massive cyber attack at one time in the world. It just doesn't happen until the other day. And they essentially shut down the national health system in Britain, Great Britain, England. Cancellation of MRIs, surgeries, treatments because of a cyber attack. And these people are, look at what they did. 100 nations. And they're still cleaning up the mess a couple days later. Now, a lot of security experts, the answer that they gave when people asked was, what do we do? What did they say? Pay the money. And Microsoft issued a bunch. It was Windows PCs and Windows systems. FedEx had problems. And nobody will say how bad the problem was. But we do know that it was cyber chaos. And this is the world that we live in. And this is the world that there are people who will take advantage of these things to tighten control. It's what Patrick Wood talks about. It's what we've talked about. I mean, I could do 3 hours of videos of people talking about this just from the recent past, because we're connecting everything. And so what's so bad about that? Everything will be connected. That's what's so bad about that. Everything will be connected. And one thing will get attacked, and it'll be chaos. And it really could come to the point where society collapses. That's the world we live in. And I will tell you, I don't want to be living in discomfort. Okay? I like my life. It's not bad. You know, I go home to a lady named Pam Howler every night now for almost 42 years. I have a pretty good life. I have a nice, easy chair. You know, I've got high-speed internet. I got a place where I can sit and work on my computer. I got a wife who lets me do that. Close to the golf course. And I have to acknowledge that all of that could change. And it could change in a way that our lives, we have no guarantee of living beyond a certain period of time, is the point. But as true believers, we need to know that that's not something we should fear. Because the Lord has us in his hand. Go read some of the Psalms, like Psalm 91 and others. They're just fantastic comfort. And we could die. But we need to get back to understanding that Christians suffer, Christians are persecuted, and Christians die. And when we die, or if we're around till the rapture, when we're raptured, we're with Christ. Either way, we win, ultimately. And we need to start to wrap our head around it, because I think we're in a time that, well, I think Melanie Phillips said it right at the beginning. We're at not a tipping point, we're at tipping points in what's happening. And it could go, you know, we had an election that seemed like we got a little bit of a reprieve, but here we are 4 months later, not even 4 months later, and the world seems even more chaotic than it did 4 months ago. And culturally, the stuff that's going on is just crazy. It's inexplicable. It's not rational to me anymore. And I know that from reading my emails and stuff, a lot of people are really upset and disconcerted. So my word to you today is, you're in the hand of God. You're here at this time because it's the way it was going to work out in your life. So remember who's in control. And even though it seems really chaotic and out of control, you're in God's hands. And he will work to protect you. He's not unaware of what's going on. I'll admit, as I've said, it is very disconcerting. I mentioned last week, I drive a lot for my work, going to courts and other places. I don't know how to describe what's going on the highways. It's crazy. Look, I read an article this week. As many people die from opioid overdoses in America now as die in motor vehicle accidents. About 35,000 people per year. A bunch of kids in my suburb, which is considered an affluent suburb, have died from opioid overdoses. It's out of control. People don't know what to do. And now there are other drugs coming in that are even more dangerous and more deadly. But look, God knows what's going on, and he'll protect us. Let's pray. Father, Lord, I just pray that you would pour out your Spirit on us, that you will keep us cognizant of the fact that you are in control and we are in your plan, and things are working out according to your perfect plan for your glory. Comfort us with the gift, with the Holy Spirit that you sent as the Comforter in these times. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.